Welcome to the EXP Group's discussion of CIMA paper P1. Another important area and a topic of the syllabus, the P1 syllabus, is entitled Managing Short-Term Finance. And we just want to walk through a couple of key notions that the candidate must take note of in order to be able to handle exam questions relating to the management of short-term finance. Effectively, we're talking about working capital management. Working capital management, we have a definition here, working definition of the components that enter into working capital. And to have an overview of the cash operating cycle, the process by which raw materials are received and paid for by the company, converted into finished goods prior to sale, and until the final receipt of cash, the company is basically out of pocket from the time it has to pay suppliers until the time it collects cash from its customers. So this cycle suggests that there is a race basically to collect cash as fast as possible so that the company doesn't have to finance this gap between cash out and cash in to the business. One of the ways in which we can measure the company's performance with regard to management of liquidity are some well-known ratios. The liquidity ratios, for example, current and quick ratio. This should all be basic review for the candidate. Turnover ratios are referring to the time it takes to collect receivables, the amount of inventory on average, the number of times it turns over during a year, number of days, and the payment terms towards creditors, how fast or slowly payables are turning over. Another important ratio which is tracked by businesses is revenue to the net working capital in the business, and that ratio is a useful indicator of liquidity. Now, if we turn our attention to inventories, the economic order quantity is a great favorite in the syllabus, and we need to understand what this is all about. The EOQ determines what the optimal amount of inventory should be reordered in order to minimize costs. There's a trade-off between ordering costs and the holding costs of keeping inventory in place. If you look at it if you look at this conceptually in an extreme case, if one were to buy all of one's inventory needs for the entire year once at the beginning of the year, then the fixed cost per order, the C, would be very low because there would be only one order placed. But holding so much inventory throughout the year and working it down gradually from January 1st would be astronomically high. If at the other extreme one were to order every day one's daily needs in inventory, then the amount of inventory being held at any given point in time in the business would be extremely low, and so would the costs. But since the number of orders would rise to a daily basis, then we would have very high costs of ordering inventory. So we can see there's a trade-off between the ordering costs and the holding costs. To make a long story short, the formula here, the optimal quantity to be ordered, is equal to this formula, which we can see at work in the following example, and I leave it to the candidate to plug the numbers which are shown in the scenario here into the economic order quantity. And just to check your work, the optimal amount of quantity to be ordered, the Q star or Q asterisk in this case, is 1,380 units. Now, with regard to working capital management, it's extremely critical that a company has in place policies and procedures in order to determine what customers to give credit to and how much credit should be granted, and also to have systematic follow-up procedures to make sure the payments are actually made. In other words, the cash is received from customers. So here's some points with regard to assessing creditworthiness of customers. The ideas here follow a traditional pattern used by banks, for example, in assessing customers, and should be applicable and useful to all businesses that have to take a risk management approach to their credit, to their granting of credit to customers. The management of working capital gives rise to other issues as well that is within the domain of managerial decision making. One is the granting of early settlement discounts and determining whether or not a company should grant such discounts and whether they are of benefit or not. So here's a worked example of a company which gives payment terms of 3 months to its customers, and it is considering whether to shorten the credit terms to 1 month if it gives a 2% settlement discount. Now, under the terms of the scenario here, the company has to do a cost-benefits analysis, whether it's favorable to alter the terms to its customers and to grant this 2% settlement discount. Now, in this particular case, let's take the base case of the starting scenario. If we have sales of $5 million, and there's sales, and their sales terms to the payment terms to customers are 3 months, then these 3 months have to be financed. Cost of capital of the company is 15%. This represents a cost of $187,500. Now, if we were to shorten the payment terms to 1 month, then the cost of financing receivables for 1 month will be equal to $62,500, and therefore we can say that the company saves gross $125,000 in gross terms. However, to move from 3 months to 1 month requires granting a cost of settlement discount of 2%. And this 2% on $5 million represents a cost to the company of $100,000. The net benefit, therefore, to the company of moving to a 1 month payment, 1 month payment terms would look like it's beneficial because the company gets a net benefit of $25,000 in this case. Another area that we have to consider is the factoring and invoice discounting, whether it makes sense for a company to get to its cash more quickly by factoring, selling its invoices, or to going to a financial intermediary to discount its invoices. Here again, the cost-benefit analysis is involved. If we look at a company here, Achilles, which has to make a decision based on current bad debt write-offs running at 1.5% and whether it will use a factor to whom it can sell its receivables. It will pay a fee, but it will also achieve cost savings in administrative costs of $1 million per annum. This is a typical example that one can encounter in the exam. With regard to the collection of debts, from a policy point of view, a company should have a set of procedures on the collection of debts, and the candidate should be able to compute the cost benefits of extending different credit policies to clients. Here's another worked example. Company with current annual sales of $3 million, 50% is cash, 50% on 2-month credit terms. I'll leave a review of this worked example to the candidate. In this particular case, without going through all of the numbers exhaustively, the analysis involves a calculation of the change in contribution to the company. In other words, there's a decrease in contribution of $30,000, and there's a reduction in cost of financing the receivables of $18,750. In other words, in this particular case, the company loses more than it gains by switching to the new credit policy. And the conclusion, based on the analysis of the numbers above, is that the change is not worthwhile. And so we've spoken of various working capital components, for example, the inventory management, receivables management, by extension payables management, that is payments towards suppliers. The management of cash itself can be summarized with regard from the standpoint of funding strategies of a company. And some of the principles that are summarized here as funding strategies will be guided by whether the company has temporary cash shortages, and therefore it can fund those short-term, meaning it can go into overdraft for short periods of time. But if there is a permanent shortage of cash, then it's, in the long run, it's more expensive to use short-term or overdraft financing, and therefore the company should seek to find longer-term sources of finance in order to correct what's deemed to be a permanent shortage of cash. The matching principle is another way of approaching the same subject. And finally, how and what to do with cash surpluses when they do arise, whether they exist for short-term periods or over the longer term. Thank you.